So Dune Awakening is an upcoming survival MMO with a greater emphasis on the survival elements. One of the biggest survival elements you would expect from pretty much every survival game is building. And building in Dune Awakening is going to not only be one of the best built building systems in any survival game I've seen, but it's also going to play a massive role in every aspect of the game and is going to play a much different role depending on how you want to go about playing the game and what type of player you are. And I think building is going to play very different roles depending on how you're going to go about playing the game. And I think it could be split into three main pillars: a PvE focused player, a PvP focused player, and a economy focused player. And I think a lot of players are going to partake in all three elements of this when it comes to building, but there's also going to be a lot of players that are going to be focused on just one of these elements when it comes to building specifically. And I think the best place to start is PvE focused players. Because of how Dune Awakening works, the first main play space you're going to go to is called Hagga Basin, and this is going to be where you're going to be building your permanent bases and this overarching area, this overarching land mass, which is the size of Conan Exile's map, is going to be mainly PvE focused as well. So Hagga Basin is where you're going to have your first taste of building, and it's also going to be where you're going to be building your permanent bases, which is also going to play a massive role for basically everybody. No matter what type of player you are, you're probably going to be having a permanent base in your specific version of Hagga Basin on your overarching server, and this is also going to be where you or the entirety of your guild stores all of your resources to then choose what to do with them next. So with that being the case, let's go into some of the basics of building. So once you first start out and you want to start building your base, you're going to place down a sub-fief console, which is basically your land claim. If you've ever played any other survival game, it can be your land claim flag, it could be your tool cupboard from Rust, whatever other claim system other survival games have. This is kind of what that's going to be, and it's going to create a hologram box in that area that you can see, which is where you're able to build. What's also pretty interesting that's not done in all survival games is this box also has height or depth, so you can't build up above past where your claim area allows you to do. And if you place this sub-fief console, you can just build anywhere in that area. That land is claimed as yours now. It did look a bit small from some of the footage we've seen, and I'm not 100% certain on how you expand these areas, because when looking at some of the base building footage, the box looks pretty small, but when you look at some of the later footage, it seems like it build much bigger bases. So more than likely, you're either able to place more sub-fief consoles to expand the area, or there's just some upgrade system into it itself. So you keep upgrading your sub-fief console to expand the radius even more. So after you've placed down your sub-fief console, you can get into the actual building system, which is going to work in a pretty similar way to most of the other survival games, but I think it's kind of an upgraded version. So first off, instead of just placing down building pieces, and you either have like a building piece in your inventory or resources in your inventory, the primary way you're going to be building in Dune Awakening is you're going to place down a hologram of that building piece, so you're able to just freely move it around without using any resources. And then after you have a place where you want it, you can then put the resources inside of it and build it as an actual physical piece. Now this allows you to do a few things much easier in Dune Awakening. First off, building nice looking bases and placing things where you want it without using bunches of resources by either wasting them and having to demolish the piece. It's all going to be much faster. You can also build with other players much more easily, because after you place a hologram, they can also move that hologram, or they could place in resources to it just as you can. And then this is also going to play really heavily into the blueprinting system, which is basically after you create a base, you can make a blueprint out of that base, and then you can either use that blueprint yourself to place on more versions of that base, or you can sell it or trade it to other players. They can use that blueprint, place down a hologram of that full base, and then put the resources into that hologram just like you normally would with any other building piece. And then they're also going to have most of the other elements you'd expect from other survival game building systems, and then even some stuff on top of that. Like in Dune Awakening, you also have things like rounded edges. Most other survival games, if you want to make something that's rounded, you just have to use a bunch of triangle building pieces and try to make like a circle or some other rounded area. But in Dune Awakening, they just have rounded pieces, which actually isn't super common in other survival games. So you're going to have a lot of elements to build the exact bases that you want. And then on top of that, after you get your actual shell of a base, you're going to have tons of other building pieces and tons of other stations to put within those bases. Like in a base, you're going to have a lot of other cosmetic elements, like you can have tables, chairs, you can have a bunch of other small little elements or assets you can put on tables like cups and other things like that to make your base feel more like a base that's kind of lived in, so you have all of those cosmetic aspects. Then you have all of the utility or actual progression aspects of all the stations you can put within your bases. You have water extractors, you have different fabricators to fabricate all of the different building elements, you have stations that are specifically built to create different vehicles. So you're going to have all of these different building stations that you're also going to want to be placing throughout your base to be able to build everything you're going to want to be able to build. And then you have one of the most important elements, which is your base generator. And this is going to be really important because without a base generator, your base can be damaged by things like sandstorms, but it also seems like you can be raided even in the Hagga Basin or somehow attacked by other players if you don't have a shield generator. And it seems like the shield generator, you'll be able to fill up enough to have 20 days of protection. So if you come on at least once every 20 days and fill up your generator, your base will basically stay there forever, at least in the Hagga Basin, and it should be at least primarily protected from pretty much everything that could damage your base. Now, one thing we haven't gotten a ton of information on is how you're going to unlock all of the different building pieces. Now, it seems like you're going to unlock most of the building pieces either through the kind of technology system, or you'll probably have a lot of the base building pieces just as a baseline when starting the game or leveling up. Now, the technology system is the unlock system of most other survival games. You level up, you get some points, and you can put it into kind of the base technology to make base weapons, vehicles, building pieces, all of those types of things. And it seems like most of the building is going to be within that. We don't know if there's going to be any very specific building pieces that you kind of have to go out and explore and do maybe higher tier content to actually unlock. We don't know how deep or specialized some building pieces will go. And then on top of all of that, there's also going to be different sets of building pieces. Now, I'm actually not sure if these different sets have different durabilities or not, because once you get into the deep desert, which we'll also go over in this video, building is going to play a bit of a different role and will probably be able to be attacked. So we don't know if these different building sets in the game are going to have any different durability elements or if they're only cosmetic. But we do know just at the start of the game, there will be these different building sets that look completely differently. And we do know you'll be able to unlock more in game, and then you'll also be able to buy more. Now, it's already pretty clear that these different sets you buy will only be cosmetic changes, but we don't know how the kind of base sets are going to work. Like I mentioned, we don't know if there's going to be a handful of base sets that actually change properties of those buildings, like the durability, and then you can just buy skins to add on top of all of those kind of base sets. We don't know exactly how that's going to work, but there is going to be earnable and purchasable skin sets for your buildings to make them look different. Like mentioned, in the Hagga Basin, which is primarily PvE focused, that's where your permanent bases are going to be, but you can also go to the deep desert once you start to reach the end game, and the deep desert is going to be fully PvP enabled, so it seems like all of the bases you place in the deep desert are going to be able to be attacked and raided by other players. Not sure how shield generators are specifically going to work. Most likely you're not going to be able to actually use shield generators on a base because that attracts a sandworm. So we're not sure if you're going to be able to use those and attract sandworms to the base that way, or if you're just not going to be able to use shield generators that big, because presumably even if you could use them, you would just attract the massive sandworms that would basically eat the entirety of your base. With PvP being enabled and shield generators not being a long-term solution, it seems like you're just going to be able to attack other players' bases in the deep desert. Now keep in mind the deep desert wipes on a weekly basis, so on that weekly wipe, all of the player bases are also going to be wiped away. So the deep desert is not permanent base building. You're basically just building things to control areas or store resources for that week, and you better have everything moved out before the Coriolis storm rolls in. Now, we do know on top of all of this, there is going to be base defensives. We have gotten to see in some footage and some officially released screenshots that there are these big turrets you're able to place around. Presumably, there's going to be different types of turrets, maybe one specifically for ground, maybe one specifically for anti-armor, maybe one specifically AA to shoot down helicopters or other flying vehicles, more specifically ornithopters. So presumably there's going to be a bunch of different defensive elements past just kind of reinforcing your base structure as a whole. So the deep desert is really where PvP focused players are going to interact with the building systems the most, because they're going to want to not only be building fortified bases to control areas every week, but they're also going to want to make sure they're keeping these bases stocked up. They're going to want to make sure they keep these bases repaired, and they're going to want to keep changing up base designs to try to make them more defensible. And this is also where economy focused players are going to come into play, because if you have, say, an economy focused player that doesn't do a lot of PvP, they can go into Hagga Basin, they can create really defensible, smartly built bases, blueprint them, and then go sell them on the market to PvP focused players. Those PvP focused players can take those blueprints and just place down whole bases in the deep desert, or at least the hologram of whole bases, and then just put in all of the pieces, put in all the resources, and now they have, say, like a bunker base or something placed down quickly in the deep desert to control an area, or maybe raid somebody or partake in a fight. And Blueprint System is going to be very strong for making raid bases, which happens in basically every other PvP survival game where you can go raid other players. So this mix of PvP, PvE, and economy focused players is really going to play a very big role in building as a whole, and building is going to play a big role in how you actually play the game, because no matter which way you play Dune Awakening, whether it be PvE focused, economy focused, trying to get rich, PvP focused, where you're trying to go out there and raid or control areas, all of these different playstyles are going to be impacted very heavily by building. So I think building is definitely something you should get yourself acclimated to once Dune Awakening is released, and start to kind of think about how to further improve your building. Now, if you're part of a big guild or even a smaller group, usually a lot of groups, even ones I usually play in, will have one or maybe a handful of players that are more focused on building, and you'll probably be able to fully play this game without actually building at all, as long as you're not a solo player, because somebody else could be someone that's much better at building bases and you're focused on PvPing or gathering resources. But I do think pretty much everybody should have some amount of experience with the building system, because it's going to play such a vital role in every aspect of the game. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.